Okay, what is the last point that we have discussed in the previous class? Yes, we identified the how you can develop the conceptual framework. How you can develop the conceptual framework if you have only the dependent and independent variables. So they're under that one. So we identify what do you mean by a concept, right? So with the example of marketing mix, IV1, IV2, IV3, and IV4, that means those are the independent variables which can be identified through the concept, right? Marketing mix is the concept. So then we identify how you can develop the topics according to the concepts and your independent variable. So the same example, our example was marketing mix and the customer loyalty. Marketing mix and the customer loyalty. Okay, so then we'll identify how you can develop the your questions and how you can develop your just the questions. What is the relationship and then the yes, which should be indicated through the hypothesis. And so you need to name the hypothesis by linking the dependent and independent variable. You need to develop the hypothesis accordingly. And then how you can develop the conceptual framework if you have the mediation impact, and then how you calculate. So did I discuss how you can develop the hypothesis if there is a mediation impact and the moderation impact? Yes or no? Yes. Did we discuss that part or else no? Yes or no? So this is really important. This is really important to develop your conceptual frameworks and the development of the hypothesis. Did we discuss that part? How you can develop your how you can develop the conceptual framework if you have the dependent, if you have the mediation and moderation impact, and how you can develop the hypothesis for those things. Did I or else discuss or else didn't I discuss that one? Please tell me. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Mediation, moderation, discuss how you can develop the conceptual framework with the hypothesis. Did I discuss that part or else no? Yes. Did I discuss that part? Hypothesis, how I can create the hypothesis for if you have the mediation and the moderation. Did we discuss? Amma කිව්වද ඒක නැද්ද? At least you can't remember. No?
Can't remember, miss.
Can't remember the means we discuss or else no? මතක නැති වුණාට අපි ඩිස්කස් කරලා දන්නේ නැහැ නේ පුතා ඒකයි. Yes.
Miss, can we start again, miss?
Start again in sense which point? Yes.
Service quality and customer loyalty.
The customer loyalty is a dependent variable. So here we identify the relationship between the concept and the independent variable, right? So what do you mean by a concept? Under the concept in the broader concept is a broader perspective, right? So within this broader perspective, you maybe have the chance to identify the independent variables. So what those independent variables under the marketing mix, the service quality, pricing, marketing, and the physical environment. So those things may be the independent variables which can be identified through the marketing mix concept, right? So then if you have the independent variables, how you can develop your conceptual framework, right? How you can develop it. So left hand side, it should included the yes, the customer loyalty, and the left hand side, you need to include the independent variables very clearly, and the dependent variable should be included in the right hand side. So then you link the independent variables with the dependent variables by linking, you need to link it, and the relationship between the independent variable plus the dependent variable should be named with the hypothesis, whether it is H1, H2, H3, and the H4. In line with this, yes, in line with this hypothesis, right? So you need to develop your questions, right? So I hope I discussed that one. Regarding the first independent variable, the independent variable is the service quality. The dependent variable is the customer loyalty. So by linking these, the service quality and the customer loyalty, the first question that we build up. So what is the relationship between service quality and the customer loyalty? And the second one, so our relationship is regarding the pricing strategies and the customer loyalty. So then we identify, is there any impact between is there any relationship between pricing and the customer loyalty? So the customer research area or the sample is the commercial banks in Sri Lanka. Third research, independent variable is marketing strategies, and the customer loyalty is the dependent variable. So then we develop the question for the marketing. What is the relationship between marketing and the customer loyalty of the commercial banks in Sri Lanka? The fourth independent variable is the physical environment, and the dependent variable is the customer loyalty. Accordingly, we identify the fourth research question is, what is the relationship between physical environment and the customer loyalty in the or is the of commercial banks in Sri Lanka? Right. So those are the four questions that we identified in line with this hypothesis. Or else the hypothesis, right? Hypothesis is similar to, or is it definitely in line with your research questions, right? Hypothesis in line with the questions. That means hypothesis should be based on your research questions, right? So the conceptual framework, in the sense what it is, it's a graphical format, right? It's a conceptual framework, in the sense it shows graphically to the reader. So what the researcher is going to do, what kind of questions the respective researcher has. Likewise, it's a graphical illustration of your research, right? So what is the independent variable? What are the independent variables? So what is the dependent variable, and what is the relationship, or else what type of questions what type of questions that the respective researcher has will be graphically shown through this conceptual framework, right? So this is the conceptual framework, right? So then regarding if we only have the independent and dependent variable, so this is how we can develop the conceptual framework. Independent variable with the left hand side, and the right hand side the dependent variable, right? The next thing, if you have the mediation impact, right? If you have the mediation impact, how you can create your conceptual framework, right? Mediator, in the sense it interface between the dependent variables and the independent variable, right? Dependent variable and the independent variable. So the same research topic, when I'm describing about the moderating or mediating variable, the research topic that I have taken is the service quality and the customer loyalty of the Sri Lankan listed hotels with the mediation impact of role of the customer satisfaction, right? So that means whether the customer satisfaction mediate or else intermediate between the service quality provided by the hotels meanwhile to the customer loyalty of these hotels. So then if there is a mediation impact, you need to develop the conceptual framework like this, right? The first one, this arrow, right? This arrow will be this arrow is the H1, right? Hypothesis number 1 will identify that one as a direct impact, right? So this is the direct impact. H1, right? So how we can write the hypothesis for the okay, right. So this is the H1. So we are identifying this one as the, yes, the direct impact, right, towards the customer loyalty by the service quality denoted by the H1, the direct impact, right? So then, so what may be the question regarding the direct impact? What may be the question? Yes. What is the impact of service quality? What is the impact of service quality on customer loyalty? What is the impact of service quality on customer loyalty? Right? So that is the question number 1. Right? So if we have the mediation impact, what may be the first question? What is the impact of service quality on the customer loyalty according to this example? Right? Second question, what may be the second question? Right? So second question may be, right? Second question may be, what is the mediating impact of? Right? So what is the mediating impact of? What is the mediating impact of customer satisfaction? What is the mediation impact of customer satisfaction in between the service quality and customer loyalty? Right? So what is the mediating impact of customer satisfaction in between service quality and the customer loyalty We identify this relationship, right? So this relationship as an indirect relationship. So from the customer service to the customer loyalty, we identify. I hope the moving the cursor can be visible to you also. Right, like this. From the service quality to the customer loyalty, what it is? It's the indirect impact, right? So that means indirect impact is created by the customer satisfaction, right? Mediator customer satisfaction, right? So then if it is a question, what is the mediating impact of customer satisfaction in between the service quality and the customer loyalty? When you're identifying or else when you're answering for that kind of a research questions, you have to use 3 hypotheses, right? 3 hypotheses. So how you can identify this indirect impact, right? So this is the indirect impact. How you can identify this indirect impact? So the first one is you need to identify the relationship between this independent variable to the mediator. This one. Independent variable to the mediator. Then second, you need to identify the relationship from the customer satisfaction or as mediate the impact to the dependent variable. Right. So then we have three steps. So then what those are? The first step is IV to the MV mediator. So then MV to the DV mediator to the dependent variable. So what we are discussing about? We are discussing about the indirect relationship. Right. So then third step is identifying the mediator impact, right? So once you're able to identify the relationship between IV to DV and DV to, IV to MV and then MV to DV, third step is identifying the mediator impact of the customer satisfaction in between this independent variable to the dependent variable. Right. So this is how you can develop the conceptual framework regarding the mediator. If it is a mediator, how many variables? How many variables are there? Three variables. Accordingly, how many relationships are there? Two relationships, or as the impact, there are two paths. The first one is the direct path. The second one is indirect path. Right. So based on that one, you will be able to create two questions. The first question is regarding the direct impact. So what is the relationship or else what is the impact of the service quality on the customer loyalty? Direct relationship. Second regarding the indirect impact, right? So you will be able to create another question. What it is? What is the mediating impact of customer satisfaction in between the service quality and the customer loyalty? Right. So then when you're when you're developing the conceptual framework for the mediator, you need to name these identified problems. Right. So therefore, the H2 is from IV to the MV, what is the relationship? And then from MV to the DV, mediator to the dependent variable, it should be named as the hypothesis 3. Last step, identifying the mediator impact. It should be placed here, right? It should be placed here below the mediator H4. H4. This is how you can develop the conceptual framework if you have the mediators. If you have the mediators, so this is how you can develop your conceptual framework. Identifying the independent variable, identify the dependent variable, and identify the mediator, and identify the direct impact and the indirect impact. Direct impact will be addressed through one question. Meanwhile, indirect relationship again identified through another research question. But when you are going to identify or when you are going to resolve, so all these second research question regarding the mediator impact, you need to identify three steps. The first step is the relationship between IV to MV. So then second relationship, mediator the dependent variable. Third one is identifying directly the mediator impact in between this IV and the DV. Right. So this is how you can develop the conceptual framework for the mediator. The next step. Third variable, what it is? The moderator. Moderate in the sense, moderator, moderate the relation, moderate a variable, moderate the relationship between independent variable to the dependent variable, right? So here, we'll change the identified research topic, service quality and the customer loyalty of Sri Lankan Sri Lankan listed hotel with the reference with the moderate impact of customer age, right? Customer age. So then how you can place your moderator? Moderator should be placed in between the independent variable and the dependent variable, customer age. It's a moderator variable. Right. So then again you may have the two questions, right? The first question, which is denoted by the H1, right? So what is the question? You can develop it as like this. What is the impact of service quality on the customer loyalty? What is the impact of service quality on the customer loyalty? Right? Second question, it may be regarding the moderator variable. Second question, it may be regarding the moderator variable. So what may be the question? What is the moderating impact of customer age? What is the moderating impact of customer age? What is the moderating impact of customer age? In between service quality and the customer loyalty. In between customer loyalty and the service quality. Hello. Okay. Okay, Anupata. Oh, good evening. Right. Sorry for that one. So if it is regarding the moderator, definitely you may having another two research questions. The first one is regarding the H1, the service quality and the customer loyalty. That means regarding the EIV and the DV. Second question regarding the moderator. Right? What is the role of the customer age as the moderator? That is the second question. So then first question will be denoted through the H1 and the second question will be identified through the H2. So that is how you can show your research questions through the conceptual framework. Always hypothesis in the sense it reflecting your research questions. Right. The next one. We discussed the control variables, but I hope we didn't identify how you can place the conceptual framework, right? So then if it is a control variable, right? So we are discussing about the control variables, right? If it is a control variables, how you can place your control variables in the conceptual framework, right? Conceptual framework, how you can note down or else how you can draw the control variables. Definitely, it should be below to the dependent variable, right? It should be below to the dependent variable. Right. Let's take the research topic like this. Now, so our research topic is corporate governance and firm financial performance of Sri Lankan listed companies. Right. So the our dependent variable is firm financial performance. Right. Always, which is a result of changes in many independent variables. Out of that many independent variables, we have selected only one, so that is corporate governance. Right, corporate governance. So then, to control the impact created by the other unidentified independent variables to the research model, we established the control variables. Right. The specialty is for the research topics, we can include more control variables. It's not should be a one. Right. So therefore, it may be two, it may be three control variables. Right. The other one, so we are not creating the research question for the control variable. So why? So we are including the control variables to control the impact created by the other variables. That means based on the control variables, we don't have any questions. So that is a strategy. And including the control variable to the research topic in the sense strategy to establish or else to mitigate or else to control the impact and impacts created by the unidentified factors to the research model, especially for the firm financial performance. Out of the lot of factors, we are selecting only one variable called as the corporate governance toward the firm financial performance. So there are a lot of factors affecting for the firm financial performance. As a strategy, accordingly, we are including the control variables, examples, firm age, firm size to the model. How we can place it below the dependent variable, we need to identify the control variables, and the other one we don't have the question for the control variables, and we are not creating the hypothesis for that one also. Right. Okay. So this is how you can develop the conceptual framework for the identified independent variables, dependent variables, moderating variables, plus the mediator variable. So now I discussed the two sets. The first one is conceptual framework. Meanwhile, I discuss how you can develop the research questions and objectives in line with the conceptual framework. So therefore, it's a recall of your memory regarding the research questions and objectives. I hope you gain the knowledge regarding the conceptual framework plus the research objectives and the questions. Right. Another concept, right? This is also very important, right? So hereinafter, we are going to identify how you can collect the data, right? How you can collect the data. What are the measurements that you can use to collect the data, right? How you can collect the data. And so when we are collecting the data, which kind of scales you need to select will be discussed hereinafter, right? So all of these things are will in line with the operationalization and the conceptualization. Operationalization and conceptualization. Right. The measurements. What do you mean by a measurement? Yes. Do you have any idea regarding the measurements? Probably you may have the idea, or else you may identify this one in the statistics subject also. Measurements. Statistics or else measurement definitely will discuss under the information technology, nominal scales, ordinal scales, and likewise. No idea. Yes. Measurement. What do you mean by a measurement? It's an assignment of numbers or symbols to the characteristics or attributes of an object, right? So it's a identification of or is assignment of numbers or other symbols to the characteristics or attributes of an object. So then the first task is identification of objects, right? So identification of objects. Objects means persons, right? It may be persons. It may be the business. It may be companies, countries, neither. Or sometime it may be the animals also, restaurants. Likewise, food items, beverage items. So those are what? So those are the objects. Object. So then, so what we are going to do is we are going to assign assignment of a number. Assignment of a number to not this object. Right? So not the object, but a characteristics or attributes of a object. Right? So then, what do you mean by a characteristics? Yes, characteristics. One aspect of a object. Right? So one aspect of a object. For example, if it is a person. If it is a person, so what may be the characteristics? It may be the motivation. Right? It may be the performance. Motivation, performance. So those are what? Characteristics of an object. Characteristics of an object. Sometimes it may be the effectiveness. Effectiveness, work performance, right? Achievements, achievements, motivation. What those are? So those are characteristics of a person. Person. The other one. If it is a business unit, if it is a business unit, what may be the characteristics? Yes, what may be the characteristics? Yes, what may be the characteristics? Performance. Neither. Business performance. Business performance may be the characteristics of a business. So then, quality. Business quality. It may be a characteristics. Effectiveness. A characteristics of organization. What else? Organizational effectiveness. Organizational efficiency. Organizational performance, financial performance, organizational non-financial performance. So what those are? So those are the characteristics of an object, right? So therefore, measurement in the sense, when you are doing a research, you need to assign the numbers to the characteristics of an object. So therefore, as an independent variable, you need to identify a characteristics of the object, not objects. So that is why when you are developing the research topics, 3 research topics, some of you included the CSR, corporate social responsibility reporting, and in on banks in Sri Lanka. So when you include like that, so I ask you, so bank is not a dependent variable, so you need to identify a measurable component of the bank. You need to identify the measurable component of the bank. So what it is? Now I hope you maybe gain the idea. So when you are doing a research to collect the data, or else to assign the numbers for these assignment of the numbers can't be happen for the objects. You can't assign the numbers for the object. How we can assign the numbers for the object? We can't do it. Can we assign the numbers for the persons? Can we give the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 like for the 1, 2, 3, 4 like to the people? No, we can't give it. So, but can we give the numbers for their efficiency? Yes, exactly. Right? So we can give the numbers for the employees' performance. How you can? If it is a highly performed, 5. If it is a average, 3. If it is a fairly performed, or else if it is badly performed by the employees, you may be given the 0 or else 1. So that means you maybe have the chance to assign the numbers for the characteristics. But you don't have the chance to assign the numbers for the object. So therefore, measurement is a very much important, as well as when you are including your dependent variable, you need to take the characteristics of object, the characteristics of object or its attribute of object, otherwise you can't assign the numbers. So therefore, this is the time if you have identified the object as your research dependent variable, please remove the object. Instead of that one, try to achieve or else try to include the characteristic of a object. So this is very much important, right? Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. So now we are going to identify the measurements, right? So measurements, when we are identifying the measurements, scale is very much important, right? So what do you mean by a scales? To be able to assign the numbers to the attributes of the object, we need the scale, right? How you measurement in the sense, you are going to identify the, or else you are going to, yes, you are going to assign the numbers for the attributes of the object. So therefore, how you can assign the numbers to these attributes of the objects through the scale, right? So then what do you mean by a scale? To assign the numbers, we need a scale, right? So then how you can assign the numbers to the scales? Scale is a tool or mechanism by which the individuals are distinguished as to how they differ from one another on the variables of interest to our study. So that means it's a scale. Scale in the sense it's a tool or else mechanism by the which the individuals are distinguished, right? As to how they differ from one another, right? So an example, so we'll take like this. So if we have two persons, right? So then we need to evaluate them, right? So how we can evaluate? By looking at them, we can't just evaluate, right? So then we have to take a scale for them. So scale in the sense, we'll take like this, two individuals. So their effectiveness, right? The first one is the first measurement is the effectiveness. So when we are going to have their effectiveness, how you can identify the effectiveness? Effectiveness is a relative figure, no? So then you can categorize whether it is highly effective or is ineffective or else averagely. The person A, high effective or is the low effective or is ineffective or is neutral person. Person B, high effective, neutral or is ineffective person. So then our observation is person A high effective, the second person or is person B, it's a inefficient or is ineffective person. So what it is? You differentiate. Ne? You distinguish individuals based on the scale. So therefore, it's a tool or mechanism by which the individuals are distinguished as how they differ from the one another. And so therefore, for the research, definitely we need a scale to collect the data. If it is a quantitative research, to collect the data, definitely we need a scale. We have four scales: nominal, ordinal, interval, and the ratio scale. So this is how you can collect the data for your research. Nominal scale. The first one, nominal scale. So how you can identify the nominal scale? It's a categorical variable scale is defined as a scale used for labeling variables into distinct classification and doesn't involve a quantitative value or its order. We ask our respondents to name their responses, right? So we ask from our respondents, okay, name your responses, right? An example I have given here, what is your gender? If I ask the question, so we are collecting the data for our research through the questions, right? So we need to ask the question whether it is a quantitative, whether it is a qualitative research, how you can gather the data by asking the questions. Right? When you are preparing the questions, you have to identify the scales. Right? So what kind of scales I'm going to use to collect my data? Based on what kind of scale I need to prepare my research question. This is not research question, questionnaire questions. Right? So based on which questions? So what kind of questions I need to include in my questionnaire will be definitely based on your scale. right? So based on your scale. If I'm taking the nominal scales, you need to answer for the, you need to develop a question based on the nominal scales. And the first example, if you are going to have a answers or have the responses from your respondent based on the nominal scale, the example is what is your gender. Here it should be mentioned as what is your gender number, what is your gender, right? S is missing here. So then if I ask the question from you, what is your gender, definitely we have two answers, ne? Basically two answers, male and female. Okay, name. So you have the previous experiences also. If you fill in the questionnaires, the first or second question may be what is your gender. So then they will give the two options whether it is male or female. So then you need to name whether you are a male one or female. Second question, another example. What is your political preference? If I ask the question, what is your political preference? There may be two persons within the same place, or else there may be a person who is using the two devices. Okay, please mute your microphone, Pita. Right, so then if I ask the question from you like this, what is your political preference? So you can suggest it as either Ranil, Sajid, or else Anurag. So you have to name it. You need to name your response, whether it is A or S. If you are referred to the Anurag, so then you can refer A. If you are referred to the Sajid, so then you can name it as S. Anyway, so I'm collecting the responses in the form of, yes, what it is. Yes, I ask you to name your responses. Name, please name. And please give the answers, or else please name it. So the third question, where do you live? If I ask the question like this, can you give it as a 1, 2, like 1, 2, 3, 4 likewise? No, you can't. Definitely, if I ask the question, where do you live? You need to tell the place. Am I from Colombo, the Kandy, Jaffna? Likewise. So then what it is? A nominal scales. If you are going to get the responses from your respondents as the name wise, so it is identified as a nominal scale. That means you are asking your respondents to label their answers. Label their answers. We are identifying it as a nominal scale. The first scale. Right. The second scale, ordinal scale, right? Ordinal scale. By a ordinal scale, yes, it is used to, yes, the variable measurement scale used to simplify deficit the order of variables. What is the importance, or is it significant, or is based on the importance and significance? So we are asking our respondents to order their preference and not the difference between each of the variables. Not the difference between each of the variable. That means differences between each one is not really known. Right? So we don't know the difference between here in the example, we don't know the difference between in very much important and fairly important. And so in that kind of scenarios, we are asking the respondents, okay, name whether it is not very much important, whether it is fairly important, whether it is not important, and mostly important thing in my life. Right? So then here, what is the example? Difference between okay and unhappy. Yes, for example, it is a difference between okay and unhappy, the same as the difference between very happy and the happy. Right? So then here the overall idea is we are asking our respondents to order your preference. Right? So if I ask the question like this, how important is religion to you? Right? How important is the religion to you? Order it. Some of you may give the idea It's not very important for me. Sometimes some of may give the answers. It's the most important thing in my life. Some are fairly agreed, not important. Right? So some are identified, it's a very important. Some if they give the way, it's a very important thing to us, whereas some are not, some are neglecting it as that means not important. Some are fairly important, some are very important, some are highly important. That means what it is. Order is there. But the thing is, speciality in between this one ordinary scale and the interval scale. In the ordinary scale, we don't know the difference. We don't know the difference in between not very important to the fairly important. Whereas in the other scale, right? Other scale. So we know the difference between the very important to the fairly important. So that is the main difference, right? So that means in example also, if we identify not important to the fairly important, we can't identify the distance. Right? So we can't identify the distance in between the not important to the very important. So therefore, we are naming this one as ordinary scale. That means used to simplify or else deficit the order of the variables. Order of the variables. Okay. Example. Another example. On the survey, you might quote the educational attainments as the 0, 1, 2, 3. Right? In this measure, high numbers means what it is? More education. That means if we have the 0 in the sense, we don't have the no A level. So then if we have the 1 in the sense, if you assign the number 1, what it is? It's having O level or having A level. So then 2 in the sense degrees, 3 in the sense masters. So that means based on the numbers, you can identify the responses were identified through the ordinal scale. Interval scale, right? Interval scale. What do you mean by an interval scale? So as a numerical scale where the order of the variable is known as well as the difference between these variables. You can apply the interval scale only if you know if you know the order if you know the difference between these variables, right? Same thing, but the difference is, as I previously mentioned you, ordinary scale and the difference between ordinary and the interval scale is, in the ordinary scales in between the responses, we don't know the difference. But in here, in the interval scales, we know the difference, right? We know the difference. Again, we can mention it as a variable which have a familiar, constant and computable difference are classified using the interval scale. That means which should be a familiar, constant and computable differences. As we previously mentioned, the variable difference is not a variable variance, variable difference is known. That means computable differences, right? Meanwhile, interval scale contain all the properties of ordinal scales, in addition to which it is offered a calculation of difference between the variables, computable differences or else calculation of a difference of the variables. The last one, the main characteristics. The last one, main characteristic of this scale is the equidence difference between the objects. So here, see here. Okay. So then the interval scale. If you are measuring, if you want to measure the IQ levels, so then in between to 95 to 100, 100 to 105, 105 to 110, 110 into the 115. So then we know the difference between these scales. Here the 5, 5, 5, 5. Likewise, that means its interval scales will be only applicable if the difference in between these variables, if the difference between these responses can be previously identified or can be computable, only that kind of scenarios we can identify also, or else we can utilize the interval scale. Right. The other one, right? Ratio scales. Ratio scale. So here the interval scales, most probably for the researchers, we are using the 5-point Likert scale as well as the 7-point Likert scale as the interval scale. Right. Ratio scale. What do you mean by a ratio scale? Yes. Ratio scales, we are getting the answers as the ratio scale, according to the ratio. So what do you mean by a ratio? Yes, as a variable measurement scale that not only procedures produces the orders of variable but also make the differences between variables known along with the information on the value of true zero. Right? So that means what we are going to do is the difference between the two variables is the same and there is a specific order between the options like this. Right? So here we'll take the example. What is your daughter's current height? Right? Sometimes it may be, yes, less than 5 feet. It may be 5.1 to 5.6. Again, it may be 5.7 to the 6. And then it may be more than 6. What it is? You can use the ratio scale. Right? So then here, so if we take it like this, if it is a 0 point, if it is a below 0 point, and if it is 1.5 to the 6.5, there may be some categories. So if it is a 5.6 to 6, so there may be some ratio. So then below 6 in the sense, again, you can use the another ratio. Right. So then second question is, what is your weight in the kilograms? So then it may be the less than 50 kilograms. Then it may be 51 to 71, 71 to 90, and then 91 to 100 kilograms. A ratio you are going to answer for normally if you are going to ask the question from the firm financial performance, this case will be used, highly used for the to measure the firm financial performance rather than for the 5-point Likert scale. So if your company net profit is in between 5 million to 10 million, or is it in between 10 million to 7 million, right? Sorry, 10 million to 15 million, 15 million to 20 million, or else plus 20, or else less than 5 million. So what it is, you are going to take the answers in the form of ratio. Right? So then another question, your assets, right? Your assets in between 0, less than 20 million. And then 20 million to 30 million, 30 million to 50 million, and plus 50. So what it is, you are getting the answers. So this is the ratio, right? So in between 50 to 71, in the sense it's a ratio. In between 71 to 19, it's a ratio. Likewise, the third one, last one is ratio scale. You may use the nominal scales. So then you may use the ordinal scales, and then you may identify the interval scales and the ratio scale. All of these 4 scales definitely used in the research, but as probably 5-point Likert scale and the interval scale will be tested through the questionnaires in the undergraduate level. But you have the chance to include other scales for your undergraduate level thesis also. Right. Okay, this is the activity. Okay, quickly do it.
Excuse me, miss.
Yes.
Your screen is not visible.
Huh?
Screen is not visible, miss. Can't see the screen.
Sure.
Means it's visible for us.
Visible, no? It's visible, no? I already shared the screen and it shows me a
Visible, ma'am.
Now it's
visible, yeah?
visible.
Okay, right. Thank you. Okay, the question is, which of the following are example for the nominal measures, nominal scale? Yes. Which one can be identified as a nominal measures, nominal scales? Yes. What is the answer? Is it nominal? Yes.
All of
E.
these choices.
All of these are nominal choices. Why? So if we ask the question gender, definitely we have the two options. What those are? Gender, male or female. Religious affiliations. We can name the religious. So then political party affiliations, you have the choices, the name. It's Ranil, likewise. So then birthplace, definitely you need to name your place. Name your place. So whether it is Kandy, whether it is Colombo, Kalutara, likewise. That means all of these are having the nominal measures. Nominal measures. Right. Next one. Identifying a concept. Last week we identified even we didn't identify the theoretical context, we identified the with the example, what do you mean by a concept? I hope it's remembered to you, the marketing mix, right? So what do you mean by a concept? It's a building block of a theory, right? So if it is regarding the marketing mix, definitely it provides the theoretical background. So definitely for the marketing research, the marketing mix will be very important. Marketing strategies, the marketing mix will be very important. Building block of a theory. Meanwhile, what it is, it's an abstracted idea. Abstracted idea of phenomena that being studied. So when it's regarding the marketing mix, how it become an abstracted idea, right? Marketing mix. So regarding a marketing mix of a product, So there are four concepts, right? Four concept: price, place, what is the other, and promotion and the product. Right? So if it is a service mix, or is the marketing mix of a service, right? Previously we identified the marketing mix of a product. If it is a marketing mix of a service, so what are the 7 concepts? Yes, did you remember that one? 7 piece of market, 7 piece of marketing mix of a service. Yes, what those are? Rather than the product, we have the service, and then we have the promotion also, price also we have, and the promotion price, place also we have. So then other than that one, we may have in the people and then physical environment. So what is the other one? Yes, procedures, no? I can't be sure about the procedures. So anyway, so we have the 7 P's for the service. 7 P's for the service. Meanwhile, we have the 4 P's for the production, product marketing mix. So that means marketing mix is an abstracted idea. It's a summary. If you're concerned about the marketing mix of a service, it includes 7 P's. Whereas if we concern about the marketing mix of a product, it includes 4. Anyway, what we are referring is, we are going to refer the marketing mix of a product and marketing mix of a service. Always not we are going to expand the 7 components included in the marketing mix of a service. Instead of that one, we always use the marketing mix of a service, marketing mix of a product. We are not going to elaborate the in-deep idea under the marketing mix of the product or service. Likewise, if we come to our context, we'll take the agency theory. Right? Agency theory, what do you mean? Agency theory also an abstracted idea. If we come to the description regarding the agency theory, how many concepts are there? There are 3 pillars: shareholders, board of directors, and the manager. So those are the main concepts, main parties in the agency theory. But we are not going to reflect them when we are discussing about something. We are not going to reflect them instead of that one. But the concept used is the agency theory. Right? So agency theory is the idea. When we are referring the agency theory, we exactly know. So those are the content included in the agency theory. If we are talking about the stakeholder theory, right? Stakeholder theory also the abstracted idea. In the stakeholder theory, we have main 2 parties: internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders, owners, managers, and the who else? Owners, managers, and the owners, managers, employees. Very good. Thank you very much. So then the external parties, in the sense customers, the suppliers, government, competitors. So those are the external stakeholders. So then when we are referring the agency theory, we can mind map regarding the broader context of the agency, broader context of the stakeholder theory. That means stakeholder theory is the abstracted idea regarding the entire stakeholders of the company. That means, likewise, concept. Right? Concept is the abstracted idea, phenomena that being studies. Right? So then, meanwhile, we can identify it as a categories for the organization of idea and observations, and the variables are the properties or characteristics of a concept. Okay, that is another component. Last week also we discussed variables, right? Variables, independent variables. Independent variables. Did you remember when we are discussing about the marketing mix? So that was the concepts, and what was the variables? So we take the variables, 4 variables: physical environment and the promotional strategies. I can't remember other 2, unfortunately. Anyway, we have taken other 2 variables. We name those things as IV 1 to 4. What those are? So those are the variables. That means properties or characteristic of a concept. Not only for the independent variable, right? Not only for the independent variable, but also for the dependent variable. You can use the concept. If it is a concept, definitely there are more than one variable. If it is a concept, there are more than one variable. If you like to incorporate two dependent variables research model, so that is okay for your undergraduate level, but don't go for the four dependent variables. Maximum is two independent variable. Likewise, you can establish the concept for dependent variable as well as with the dependent variable, similar to the dependent variable plus the independent variable. Last week, we discussed how you can develop or how you can identify the several individual variables under the marketing mix concept. The same process can be applied to the identification. If you are referred to the concept of a dependent variable, same process can be applied to development of those concepts, right? So then while indicators are always measuring or quantifying the variables, right? The another thing, right? So another thing is indicators. Indicators. What do you mean by an indicator? So these things will be very important for the operationalization. Now we are moving towards the operationalization. Already we have completed the conceptualization. That means conceptualization in a sense graphically. So we are showing to our readers so how we are going to do this research with the framework plus the questions. Right now we are moving towards the step by step. We are moving towards the operationalization. Very important concept. So it is very important part in your research proposal, right? Not only the proposal, but also the dissertation also. Right. So next thing, indicators, right? Indicators. What do you mean by an indicator? What is it? A way of measuring or quantifying variables. Quantifying variables. So then we have the concept. The concept, within the concepts, we have the variables. So then each and every variable may have the indicators, not indicator, indicators, right? So what do you mean by an indicator? The way how you measure your variable, the way how you measure your variable, right? Okay. I will draw it. Let me annotate. Okay. Here, marketing mix is a concept, and then it has several variables. It may be the independent or else dependent. Here we identify it as an independent variable. So because the independent variable of this research is the marketing mix. So then concept is an abstracted idea of phenomena regarding something else. So then variables, right? So under the concepts, we are identifying the variables. So this is the concepts and these are the variables. What do you mean by the indicators? Right. Indicators in the sense, the way how you measure your variable. For example, how you can measure the service quality. Yes. How you can measure the service quality based on the number of complaints. What else? Yes. Service quality based on the number of complaints and what else? Yes. Quality, how you can
Feedback.
measure. Yes.
Feedback or
Frequent.
reviews.
Okay, frequent. The frequent number of or else the number of times that the particular patient come to the service place, or else whatever the service user will come to the place. That means number of complaints and the frequency. Then the frequent may be taken as the indicators for these variables, or else the way how you measure the variable, the way how you measure the variable will be detected through the indicators. To measure the variables, you need to use the indicators. Otherwise, you are not willing to measure the service quality or else identified independent variables. Okay. Right. So then based on the indicator wise, you need to develop the questionnaire questions, right? So it may be even use the whatever the scale, nominal scales, ratio scales, whatever the scales you need to use to develop your or else to measure your indicators, which will be ultimately identifying or as measuring your concept, measuring your independent or as dependent variable and the concepts. So that is how it happens. The concept is there. So that is the broader perspective. Within the concepts, you identify the variables, right? So within the concepts, we may have a lot of variables, and then based on the variables, you may be identifying the indicators. That means the way how you are going to measure the variables will be identified through the indicators, right? Next one. Now we are coming towards the operationalization. Previously, we discussed the conceptualization with the graphical formats. Now we are identifying the operationalization. Operationalization. What do you mean by the operationalization? Yes. The reduction of the abstract concepts to render them in a tangible way is called as the operationalization of concept. You need to show how you are going to do this research. What kind of measurement scale will be used, right? So then what kind of research question may be asked? So what are the independent variables? What are the concepts? Right? What is the basic concept? Accordingly, what are the variables that I have? It may be the independent, dependent, or also mediator, moderator, control variable. So then once you identify your variables, what kind of indicators will be utilized for your research? So then if it is an indicator, so what kind of dimensions do we have, right? So before moving to the variables, do you have the dimensions, right? Dimension should come before the before the variables, right? So then concepts are there. So then variables are there. Under the variables, you may have some dimensions. So then according to the dimensions, you have some indicators. Sometimes if you don't have any dimensions, directly you have the indicators for the variables. And then once you identify the indicators for your variables, you need to identify the measurement scale of that independent variable, or else whatever the dependent variable, whatever the variable. So this, you need to show this graphical picture to your readers, where we are calling it as a operationalization, right? Operationalization, what you are going to operate your research, right? So then operationalization is done by looking at the behavioral dimension, facts, and the properties denoted by the concepts. So the basic is concept. You need to initiate your operationalization with the concepts. So therefore, operationalizing a concept involves a series of steps. We'll identify what those steps are. Right. The first step. What is the first step? You need to come up with the definition of a construct or a concept, right? Construct or concepts that you want to measure, right? So what is the concept? The initiation with the concept. So then it is necessary to think about the concept of a measure, right? Initially, concept of a measure. That is an instrument, or one, it may be one or more instrument, one or more item or question that actually measure the concepts that one wants to measure has to be developed. So then, as I previously told you, you need to identify the response format. Identifying the concepts, identifying the variable, second one. So then third one, identify the response format. So then what is the last one? Yes, last one, finally, the validity and reliability of the measurement scale has to be assessed. That means the first step is identifying the concept. So then you need to identify that if there are any dimensions or if there are any variables, you need to clearly identify those things. And then so if I'm having the indicators to measure this construct or is the identified variable, you have to identify the responses format. We have 4 responses formats, but those are nominal, ordinal, interval, and the ratio scale. So those are the 4 scales, and that one definitely we are taking the, for the undergraduate, we can identify those 4 indicators to your questionnaire, but normally most of the students, so they are taking the 7-point or 5-point Likert scale questionnaire type, which is belongs to the interval scale. So then once you develop your operationalization table, operationalization, so you need to check the reliability and the validity of these responses format or its measurement scales. That means once you get the answers from these 7s or is the whatever the scale, you need to check the reliability and the validity of these answers which you have gained through this whatever the format. That is it identified as the reliability and validity. To test the reliability and validity, we have the statistic measurements, cone branch alpha, and the as well as the composite reliability. And for the reliability, we have the AVE values. Sometimes we are testing it through the KMO Bartlett test according to the statistical software. So the software statistics techniques may be differ. Anyway, you need to check the reliability and validity of a questionnaire once you collect the data through this responses format. Right. So this is an example. Okay, try to identify is there any dimensions, is there any concepts, and is there what is the independent variable? So what may be the dependent variable, or else what are the indicators? And likewise, by looking at this one, try to identify it's regarding the learning. It's regarding the learning, how you can operationalize the concept of learning. Try to identify the concepts, dimensions, and the indicators or is the variables. Okay. Regarding the dimension, I will tell something regarding the dimension also. Dimension in the sense, it's a type. Right? If the sum of the variables, it has more types. An example, we'll take the CSR, right? CSR in the sense, it having how many components? Three components, so all three dimensions. What those are? We identify the corporate social responsibilities, right? Reporting of the corporate social responsibilities having three dimensions. So what those are? The first one is the, yes, social responsibilities. What is the other one? Yes, it having three things, the corporate, social, and what is the other one? Responsibilities. Ne? So that means, so it includes three aspects. Another best example, not for the corporate social responsibility, ESG reporting. A best example is ESG reporting. In the ESG reporting, how many dimensions do we have? Yes, ESG reporting covering three dimensions. So that is the best example. Yes, ESG reporting. ESG reporting, what are the three dimensions? Yes. What those are?
Environment, social, and governance.
Very good, right? So ESG reporting covers three aspects. So therefore, we can identify it as a environment, the environment, and then what is the other one? Social responsibilities, and the other one, the last one, the corporate governance. Corporate governance principle or as governance principles will be identified the ESG reporting. That means a dimension. A dimension. So another example. With regard to the dimensions, performance, right? So if we take the performance, what will be the dimensions of the performance? Sustainable performance, another thing. Sustainable performance, if it is a sustainable performance, how many dimensions are there? Three dimensions. So what those are? So those are familiar concepts to you, right? Sustainable performance. What those are?
Government and ethics. Government and ethics means
Sustainable performance, government government තියනවද? Sustainable performance, it covers the environmental performance, social performance, and the economic performance. Right? So, sustainable performance, 3 dimensions. But those are, we are identifying the economic performance, we are identifying economic performance since the financial performance, and the other one is the environmental performance, the other one is the social performance. The best example for the again the dimensions. ආකාර කියලා අපි අඳුන ගන්න. සමහර variables තියෙනවා ඒ වගේ විවිධ ආකාරයෙන් තියෙනවා. හොඳම උදාහරණ තමයි sustainable performance. Sustainable performance කියන එකේ ආකාර තුනයි මොනවාද? Environmental performance, financial performance or as economic performance, and the other one is the social performance. The concept is sustainable performance, right? The concept is sustainable performance. It's not having the variables, it has the dimensions, various dimensions. So therefore, you need to very clearly identify the dimensions and the variables and the concepts. Some of the concepts, it doesn't have the variables, but it has the dimensions. Some of the concepts, they have the variable. Meanwhile, so the within this variable, those are having the dimensions. The first one is some of the variables, some of the concept, it has the dimensions. Right? It has a dimension, but it doesn't have the variables. Right? Some of the concepts, so they have the variables, and meanwhile, so with each and every variables also having the dimensions. ආකාර තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. මේ concept එකක් කියලා කියන්නේ ගොඩාක් ලොකු දෙයක්. එතකොට මේ concept එකේ තියෙනවා variables. ඒතර එක variable එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ variable එකේ තියෙන ආකාර වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Here in the example, what is the concept? Yes, okay. Try to identify it. So the thing is, concept is very important, right? The variables are very important. Dimensions are very important. And then indicators are very important. And then once you identify all of these things, you need to identify the scale. So they are very important. Concept, that is the main thing, variables, dimensions, and the indicators. Concept, variables, dimensions, and the indicators. To the operationalize your research, you need to have a clear idea of these 4 things. Once you have a proper idea regarding these indicators, concepts, dimensions, variables, you need to identify, you can identify the scale for the concept, right? Okay, by looking at this one, try to identify the concepts, dimensions, variables, and the indicators. Yes. Okay. What is the concept? Here, what is the concept? Yes. Learning, understanding, retention, application, and then answer the question correctly, give the appropriate examples, then recall the material after some elapse of the time. So then solve the problem, applying the concept, understanding and recall, and then integrate with the other relevant materials. So those are the identified things. So out of these things, what may be the concepts? So what are the dimensions, or what are the variables, and what are the indicators? Tell me. Learning. Learning is what? It's the base concept, right? Learning is the concept. Do we have the variables or dimensions? Dimensions are here, right? Dimensions are here. Learning may be occurred through the understanding, retention, and the application. So therefore, learning has been comprised with here, according to the example, 3 dimensions. So what those are? Understanding, retention, and application. Those are the dimensions of the learning. Dimensions of the learning. So then under the dimensions, right? Under the dimensions, we have the what those are? Indicators. The way how you measure the dimension, or is the way how you measure the variable. Here the retention, application, and understanding become the dimensions. Dimension of a learning. Right. So then answer question correctly. Can we able to measure the understanding of the understanding by providing the answers for the question very correctly? Yes, exactly. By asking the questions, teacher or lecturer will identify the level of understanding of the student. Right? So then give appropriate example. If I ask you to give the example for the concepts, if you identify it properly, you may have the chance to give the appropriate example. So that why we are giving the examples, because if you have the understanding, you may be able to give the appropriate examples. Right? So then, so those are 2 indicators of the understanding, dimension understanding. So then, retention, recall your memory. It's another form of learning. So then, how you can measure it? Recall the material after lapse of the time. After 2-3 months, if I ask the question from you, neither. So then I lectured about the quantitative and the qualitative research. So then, so that is the first week, first lesson. If I ask you, what do you mean by a quantitative research? If you can answer for it properly, so you will have the recall. Right? Dimension recall, whereas you will be able to retain your retain the lesson things. That means another form of learning. It's a retention. We will be able to measure the retention through the indicator of recall the material after some lapse of the time. So then application, another dimension. Right? So you are learning through the application also. You are learning through the dimension. You are learning through the understanding. You are learning through the retention. So then application, how we can measure the application? By solving the problem, right? Solve the problems, applying the concepts, understood and recall. If I give you the case, right, regarding the concepts, I will give a case study to you. So then you identify, so how you can apply the, identify the lesson concept to your this case study. So that means you are going to solve the problem. It's application. If you will be able to solve the or else provide the answers properly for the case study, I hope you have the application. That means ultimately it directed through the learning. So then integrated with the other relevant materials. So then once I lectured you the concepts, you should have the ability to match the lesson concept with the other lessons also. If we have the idea, if you can, so I will identify, okay, you have the application. So you can learn through the application also. And again, it's a dimension of the learn. So therefore, you need to identify properly regarding your variables, regarding your research variables. Is it having any? Is it belongs to a concept? If it is belongs to a concept, you can identify the variables under the concept. Sometimes under the variables, you may have the chance to identify the dimensions of the variable, whereas sometime, and then once you identify the dimensions of this variable, definitely you need to identify the indicators for this dimension or variables, dimension or variable, right? Okay, so this is how we are going to operationalize, right? So this is the operationalization table, right? Operationalization table, right? So for to understand the concepts, variable and the indicators, right? Here, what is the concept? Employee is content, right? So it's a concept, right? So under that one, so what may be the variable? Retention to leave. Retention to leave. How you can measure it? How you can measure it? Present perception of the integration to leave the organization. That is how you can measure the intention to leave. So then if we take the concept of comfortable work environment, it's also a concept, right? So then what do you mean by the variable? Working condition. Under the comfortable work environment, the variable is working condition. So then regarding the variable, if you don't have the dimension, directly you can identify the indicators for the variable. So what is the indicators? How you can measure this variable? Present perception on the physical and supportive working conditions. You can get it. And so then to measure or else to collect or else to measure this indicator, you can use the measurement. So what is the measurement? 5-point Likert scale measurement. 5-point Likert scale measurement. That means it's the interval scale. Belongs to the interval scale. So likewise, the financial benefits. Next example, financial benefit is the concept. Under that one of financial benefit is which identified as the variable is the salary. Other may be bonus. Other may be overtime. So what those are? So those are variables under the financial benefits. Right? So but the research you include the financial benefits and the employee retention. Your research topic is financial benefits and the employee retention of garment industry Sri Lanka. Under the financial benefits, you can take the variables such as salary, OT, bonus and likewise. So then how you can measure the salary, annual salary of an employee? By identifying the average annual by identifying the annual salary or its average salary. So then you will be able to measure the salary of an employee. So then the total consolidated annual salary received for the 2024 total annual salary will be the measurement. Right? So that means another concept variable indicator. So then the last one, opportunity for capacity development. What is a variable? What one of a variable under that one is the training. So then how you can measure it? Training workshop attendance. The how many workshops conducted during the year, or is how many, or is the number of workshop attended by the some of the employees. So then here how you can measure it? Number of all training workshop attended during the 2014 or whatever the year. That means measurement. So likewise, you need to clearly identify what is your concepts, Do you have the variables under that one? And to measure the concept, to measure the variable, do we have an indicator and how you can measure it? Again, another example, right? Another example. So say, take here, the concept is the return on equity. Return on equity, ROE, right? What is the other one? Determinants of the return on equity. That means if we create the research topic for this one, factors affecting for ROE or as determinants of the ROE in whatever the industry in Sri Lanka listed companies. So that may be the concept. And so that may be the research topic. Under that one, we have the independent variable and the dependent variable. If we take it as a factors affecting for the return on equity, the dependent variable is the ROE, whereas the independent variable is hiddenly included as the factors or as determinants. In that sense, how the variable is concept also the return on equity. The variable is which one? Return on equity ratio. You will be identify the return on equity through the return on equity ratio. What is the indicator? How you can write it? How you can write the, or else how you can measure the your variable with the ratio, ROE ratio. How you can measure it? Net income divided by the average equity. Net income divided by the average equity. Right? So that again, it's your dependent variable. If you take as the independent variable, the determinants of the return on equity, according to this table, we have 5 variables. 5 variables. So what those are? Determinants of this return on equity are operating expenses ratio, personal productivity ratio, written off ratio, cost per borrow ratio, and the debt to equity ratio. So those are the sum of ratios that determine the return on equity. Return on equity. What is the indicator? How you can indicate? How you can measure these how you can measure these ratios? Based on the ratio scale. Based on the ratio scale. Indicator is the ratio. So then measurement is operating expenses divided by the average gross portfolio and likewise. So that is again ratio. Indicate also the ratio measurement. Under the measurement, you include the how you can calculate this ratio. This is a fully second data use operationalization table. For this research, definitely the respective researcher has been taken the second data. Whereas here we have taken the primary data operationalization table. So therefore, if it is a primary data relevant research, you need to build up the operationalization table like this. I will lecture you how you can develop the operationalization table with the resources also. But the concept is if you are using the primary data, definitely you need to identify concepts, variable, indicators, and the measurements very clearly. Meanwhile, sometime if you are dealing with the secondary data, so you don't have the dimensions and you don't have sometimes the indicators, right? So sometimes you may have the only concepts, variable, rather than the dimensions, you have the indicators only and the measurement. So therefore, based on your type of data, right? Based on the basic concept, your dimensions, your variables, your indicators, your measurement definitely will change. Therefore, please correctly identify what is the relevant concept you are research. Under that one, what may be the variables. Under the variables, please check whether there are any dimensions of the variables. And then if there are dimensions or as if there are no any dimensions, please try to identify the indicators according to the variable wise or as the dimension wise. So then once you identify the indicators, you need to develop the measurement scale for the dimension. Or else what you need to identify the measurement scale for the indicator. Indicator wise, we are developing the measurements. Right. So therefore, please address this one. Concepts, variable, indicators, measurements. Right. Okay. The next one. We will have a 5 minutes break and come. Before moving to the operationalization table, we'll have a 5 minutes break and come. Okay, we'll start again. So we are discussing about the operationalization table. So how we can develop the operationalization table? Rather than for the previous table, so what is the new thing here? You need to specify the source, right? What do you mean by the source? Here the last column. For the dissertations, for the research topic, you must for the research proposal, you must develop the operationalization table, right? So which is coming under the method chapter 3 methodology, right? Chapter 3 methodology. Now step by steps we are moving towards the chapter 3 also, right? So this is the initial steps that we are taking to start the methodology chapter. Already first we have discussed about the chapter number 1. So it includes the research problem, research questions and the research objectives, and we completed the chapter 2 also, literature review. That is chapter 2. Now the third chapter we are moving towards the third chapter, so that is methodology, right? Methodology. Right. So in the methodology, the basic concepts are, right, basic things are, you need to include the operationalization and you need to include the conceptualization, and then you identify the sample population sampling framework, your research philosophies, your research methods, your research strategies, and likewise all the things will be identified under the methodology chapter. That means how you are going to operate or is the conduct your research. So this is my strategy. I'm going to use this technique to do my research. Likewise, the methodology of your research should be stated in the method chapter 3 methodology. Right. So in the chapter 3, the main concept or the main component is operationalization table. Right. So then how you can prepare the operationalization table? First, you should have idea regarding your concept. Right. Regarding here in the given example, emotional confident. Right. Emotional confident is our independent variable. We are naming it as an IV. And then our what is our dependent variable? Customer retention, right? Emotional confidence and the customer retention. So within that one, we have the brand loyalty also. Brand loyalty to retain the customer rather than for the emotional confidence. Brand loyalty also impacting, or else it is a interface between the emotional confidence and the customer retention. Moderator variable. So we are naming it as a MV, moderator variable. Right. So these are the concepts. So they under the concepts also the variables also same as the concept, emotional confidence, brand loyalty, and the customer retention. Right. So then to measure this variable, we need to identify the indicators. Right. So what may be the indicators? The brand attitude, right? Brand, how you can measure the emotional confidence through the brand attitude, right? Brand attitude. So what is the other one? Brand awareness and the brand experience. So by observing the brand attitude, brand awareness, brand experience, you may have the chance to detect the emotional confidence. The second one, brand loyalty, right? So how you can identify brand loyalty? Trust on the brand, the expectations and the brand availability will be identifying the brand loyalty. So then customer retention, how you can identify the customer retention? Through the customer satisfaction and the customer engagement. So those are the indicators for the identified variables: emotional confidence, brand loyalty, and the customer retention. How you can identify the indicators? Then mama indicators ගැන කියනවා. ඔයාලා බලන්න ඇති කොහොමද මේ indicators හොයාගන්නේ කියලා. How you can find the indicators? Yes, how you can find? Through the literature review. You can't use the chat GPT to generate or else to identify the indicators. right? Definitely you should refer the papers. You should refer the papers or else the similar articles, research findings to identify the indicators, right? Regarding, I hope you already identify the variables, right? I hope you already identify the variables. Regarding the variables, how you can identify the indicators by reviewing the literature review, So then measurements in the sense how you measure the indicator, how you are going to answer for these indicators. Measurement, all of these indicators will be measured through the 5-point Likert scale 5-point Likert scale questions. To measure these indicators, we are taking the question in the form of 5-point Likert scale questions. Right? An example, 5-point Likert scale may be the scale into 1 to 5. Right? Normally started with the 1, strongly disagree. Then 2, it is disagree. And then 3, it is neutral. 4, it is the satisfied, and then the last one, 5th one, strongly satisfied, right? If it is strongly dissatisfied, started with the strongly dissatisfied and the dissatisfied, and then neutral, satisfied, and the strongly satisfied. Sometimes, so regarding the customer satisfaction, we can take the satisfaction. Regarding the agree, right? So you can start with the 5. The number 1, it is strongly disagree and disagree. That is number 2. Third one, that is the neutral. Fourth one, I have taken the agree, no? Disagree. So then the 4th one, agree. And the last one, strongly disagree. Strongly disagree, neutral, agree, and the strongly agree. So that is how you can take the 5-point Likert scale for the agree perspective, right? So then happiness, also happy, strongly happy neither. So or else strongly dissatisfied. Likewise, you can take so there are lot of 5-point Likert scale formats. Sometime if you want to measure the satisfaction, you can start with the satisfaction. If you want to identify the happy, so then you can start with the unhappy, happy, and likewise also strongly happy and likewise. So then if it is regarding the agree, you can start with the strongly agree to the strongly disagree. Likewise, you need to search those things. The measurement, 5-point Likert scale measurements. Sometimes it not may be the 5-point Likert scale measurements if you are taking the qualitative research. So you can use the ordinal scales also. But we are normally recommending you to go with the quantitative research, not the qualitative research. Because the qualitative research, rather than for the qualitative research, if you are doing the quantitative research for your degree, so it will add a value to you. Right, so then quantitative also we had having a values also. But if you can come up with the quantitative studies, so that is better for your level. So then, what do you mean by the source? As I previously told you, when you are identifying these indicators, you need to literature, right? Normally, indicators will be not isolately mentioned in the literature papers, right? So when you are referring the literature, when you are referring the similar articles, the operationalization table will be appeared in their papers. How they measure their variables. An example, if you are going to identify the emotional confidence and the customer retention in the Bahrain context, right? So that person has identified the emotional confidence through the these indicators, and he has used the 5-point Likert scale. The person is Wajid, right? Wajid 2018. He used brand attitudes, brand awareness, and the brand experience, the 3 indicators to measure the variable emotional confidence with the measurement of 5 Likert scale. So then, based on findings, I have also used the same indicators and measurement for my variable emotional confidence. The source in the sense from where you have extracted these indicators and measurement. This is a must. ඔයා කොහින්ද මෙන්න මේ indicators ටික හොයාගත්තේ මෙන්න මේ measurement එක හොයාගත්තේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මේ දෙන්නම එකම තැනකින් තමයි හොයාගන්න ඕනේ indicator එක තැනකින් හොයාගෙන measurements එක තැනකින් හොයාගන්න ඕනේ නැහැ ඔයාලට research refer කරනකොට අනිවාර්යෙන් මේ table එක පෙන්නනවා quality papers වල මේ table එක දෙනවා ඒගොල්ලෝ එතකොට ඔයාලට ගන්න පුළුවන් indicators measurements from that research. Okay, so then if we are considering about the brand loyalty, right? So brand loyalty has been tested through the 3 indicators with the 5-point Likert scale question. Who is used then? Michelle. Michelle 2012 has identified 3 indicators: brand availability, expectation, and trust on brand to measure the variable brand loyalty with the measurement scale of 5-point Likert scale. Right. So then last one, customer retention. Right, customer retention has been identified by the Dr. Krishan, A.R. Krishan, with the indicators of customer satisfaction and the customer engagement by 5-point Likert scale questions, right? In 2013, right? When I'm conducting the research on the emotional confidence and the customer retention with the mediating impact of the customer brand, with the mediating impact of brand loyalty. So I have taken these 2. That means 8 indicators from the 3 research. Right? මම මේවා කොහෙන්ද හොයාගත්තේ කියන එක තමයි මේ source column එකෙන් include කරන්නේ. Some of you are confused with this source column. They are including it as the annual report, and likewise. That means if you are including the annual reports, I hope your intention is from where I'm going to collect the data will be included to the source. That is not. Right? Source in the sense from where I have extracted these indicators and the measurement. Right? You are normally you have the misunderstanding regarding the source. The students are including the annual reports and the CBSL report, central bank report under the source column. That means their intention is from where I am going to collect the data. So that is not the purpose of the source column. Purpose of the source column is you need to declare from where you have taken these indicators and the measurement for these indicators. මම මේවා මෙහෙන් තමයි හොයාගත්තේ. මෙන්න මේ paper එකෙන් තමයි හොයාගත්තේ කියන එක තියෙනවා. So then if you are conducting the research regarding the 3 variables, you can go with the 3 sources. Sometimes you may have the one source, right? Sometimes you may have the 2 sources. Regarding the emotional confidence and the brand loyalty, you have extracted the indicators and measurement from a one research article. That means watch it. But whereas the customer retention, the indicators and the measurement have been extracted from the Dr. Krishan research. Right? Sometimes it may be 3 different persons, sometimes it may be sometimes these indicators and measurements get extracted from the one articles, likewise. It may be based on your literature review. ඔයාලට මේ එකින් එකකින් හොයාගන්න ඕනේ කියලා එකක් නැහැ. එතකොට variables ගොඩක් තියෙනවනම් එක එක sources ගන්න පුළුවන්. අපි එක එක මෙන්න මේ අපි source column එකේ include කරන research findings differentiate වෙනවා නම් right? අපි කියනවා ඔයාගේ literature review එක හොඳයි කියලා. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට ඔයා මේ ඔක්කොම මේ variables ඔක්කොම measure කරන indicators සහ measurements ගන්න එකම research එකකින් නම් ඇත්තටම ඔයා ඒක ඒ research එකම copy කරලා වගේ කියන අදහසක් තමයි එන්නේ. හැබැයි if you are taking the different sources to measure these different variables, so that is a good indicator for your literature review. Right? So therefore, always try to include the different sources regarding these indicators and the measurements for the measurement of these variables. Right. So this is how you can develop your operationalization table, very important to your research or else the dissertation. Right. So what are the variables? So then customer Yes, customer retention is our dependent variable according to our operationalization table. And the brand loyalty, that is the mediator. It may be replaced here or else below here. So then emotional confidence, so what it is, that is the independent variable. Independent variable should be placed in the left hand side. Right hand side, the customer retention, that is a dependent variable. Normally the mediator plus moderators placed in between the dependent and independent variable. Control variables definitely should be placed below the customer retention. That means dependent variable. Right. Next important point, development of hypothesis. Development of hypothesis, very important. Why? What do you mean by a hypothesis? Yes, hypothesis. Yes, hypothesis states your prediction about what your research will find. What your research will find. Or else we are calling it as a, yes, tentative yet testable statement which predict what you expect to find in your empirical data. Or else we are calling it as a testable statement. Testable statement which shows the relationship between two or more variables, right? It's a testable statement which shows the relationship between two or more variables, right? So that means if we are going testing hypothesis in the sense you are going to find the solution for your research problem, right? Hypothesis developed based on your questions, right? Last week we discussed your problem will be divided into subsegments, right? Your research problem, the heart of the research is the research problem. If you don't have a problem, you can't initiate the research, right? So therefore, research problem is the main thing, but we can't directly identify the research problem. So therefore, what you can do is you need to divide this research problem into several stages, several segments, subsegments, whereas we are calling it as research questions, research questions. So then once you identify your questions, in line with the questions, you need to develop your objectives. Objectives. How you can develop your objectives? Definitely it should start with the phase 2 plus action work to identify. Right? If it is a impact level, you can identify. So then if next term to demonstrate or to find out, to investigate, to assess. Likewise, so you can develop the research objectives in line with the research question, right? Research question. You divide the problem into the subsegment, whereas we are calling it as the research objective, research questions. In line with the research questions, you need to develop the research objectives. Research objectives. Again, how you can develop the hypothesis? Right? How you can develop the hypothesis? Hypotheses are in line with your research objectives. Each and every objective should have the hypothesis. Right? Should have the hypothesis. Sometimes for some of the research questions, we are not normally developing the hypothesis, but most probably a lot of research questions will be tested through the hypothesis. If we are taking statistical technique to identify that, to answer for that research question or else to answer for that, to achieve that objective, you need to have a hypothesis. To have a hypothesis. Hypothesis we discuss. Right? Did you remember? So this one. Right? This is a conceptual framework where I illustrate the hypothesis. Hypothesis. Right? Okay. Right. So then hypothesis. We have two types of hypothesis. right? So hypotheses, we have two type of hypotheses. So what those are? Null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. What do you mean by a null hypothesis? I hope you all have the idea regarding the hypothesis and you had the subject statistics. So under that one, the fourth lesson is the hypothesis testing, as I remember according to my knowledge with the undergraduate. So then the lesson 4 is the hypothesis testing. You are testing hypothesis for the population data with the sample data also. Right? So therefore, I don't need to lecture you regarding the how to develop the hypothesis. I will lecture you how you can apply the hypothesis writing in the research context. Right. So the null hypothesis is the hypothesis set up to be rejected in order to support an alternative hypothesis. Right? Alternative hypothesis labeled as the HA. If there are a lot of hypotheses, you need to name it as a HA or as H1, right? So then, normally the null hypothesis will label as the H0, right? So we can't exactly identify whether it is H1, HA, H2 and like us based on your development. So it may be differ. Right, based on if there are a lot of hypotheses, you can use the 1, 2, 3, 4 and AB likewise. So then alternative hypothesis, which is the opposite of the null hypothesis, that means positive towards, is a statement expressing the relationship between two or more two variables or indicating the differences between the groups. Right, null hypothesis sorry, null hypothesis statement that we are going to test, whereas that we are alternative hypothesis, the hypothesis that we are going to test, and the null hypothesis in the sense it is the hypothesis that we are normally forming to be rejected, right? That means null hypothesis always showing the negative sides, whereas the alternative showing the, okay, if there is a possibility to happen the A and B, so there is a possibility, it will be indicated to the alternative hypothesis, right? So then, write the hypothesis for the activity. You need to write the hypothesis for the developed conceptual framework, right? So how you can start? Okay, if you can write down this one, so that is good. So if I had the physical lectures, I'm normally writing, giving the answers, practical example, write down. So therefore, if you can write down this one, that is better, right? So this is a conceptual framework, right? So which include the three variables: mediator, independent, dependent, right? So this is what? This is H1. H1, it shows the direct relationship, right? Whereas H2, H4, H3 regarding the indirect relationship. So then how you can develop the, how you can write down the hypothesis for the H1, right? H1, how you can write it? Yes? Yes? There is how you can write it? There is a positive impact, right? So there is a positive impact of emotional confidence on the customer retention, right? How you can write it? It may be started with there is a positive impact of emotional confidence on the customer retention. So that is a one way. So then what is null hypothesis? There is a no impact of emotional confidence on the customer retention. Right? So you can start the hypothesis with this term, there is a relationship. The thing is, you need to specify this one. How you can specify this one? So normally hypothesis will be tested under the three different confidence levels. But those are 95, 90 and 99 confidence level, whereas the significant levels may be the 1, 5 and 10. Right? Both confidence level and the significant level should be equals to the 1. Right? 90, if it is a 99 confidence level, in the sense the significant level is 1. If there is a 90% confidence level, in the sense significant level is the 10. If there is a 95 confidence level, in the sense 5% significant level. So both together, confident plus the significant should be equals to the 1. Anyway, right, regarding this emotional confident and the customer retention, how you can specialize or else how we can specify the identify the hypothesis. There is a positive significant impact of emotional confidence on the customer retention. You need to mention significant impact, significant relationship or significant positive relationship. Significant should be mentioned there because why? Because you are testing 3 confident level or else you are taking 3 or 1 confident level. Out of these 3 confident level, you are taking normally 1 confident level to test. Right. Hello? Right. Sorry. So then, since you are taking the confident level as well as significant level, you need to mention the term significant, right? So how you can write down the null hypothesis? There is a no significant impact of the emotional confidence on the customer retention, right? So H2, how you can write down the H2? So there is an impact or there is a significant impact of emotional confidence on the brand loyalty, right? H3, there is an impact of brand loyalty. There is significant impact of brand loyalty on the customer relationship, customer retention. The thing is how you can write down the fourth hypothesis, right? So if you remember, when we are identifying the question for the model mediator, right? I gave you the 2 questions. The first one is regarding the direct relationship. The second one is that is regarding the indirect relationship. What is the impact of, what is the moderating impact of, as I remember, what is the moderating impact of customer satisfaction in between the service quality and the in between the service quality and the customer loyalty. So this is what we identified under the mediator impact. So this is the first question and this is the second question, right? When you are answering for the second question, how many hypotheses you had? You have 4 hypotheses. So you have 3 hypotheses. First, when you are answering for that question, you need to identify H2, that means IV2 moderator. So IV to mediator to the dependent DV, and then again you need to identify the mediating impact, not moderating, mediating impact. So then how you can write down the how you can write down the hypothesis for the mediator. So there is a mediating impact of brand loyalty in between the emotional confidence and the customer retention. So that is how you can write down the hypothesis for the brand loyalty, the mediator, right? So rather than for the there is, when you are developing the research hypothesis with the term there is, you instead of that one, you can use another terms also. How you can? So what may be the examples? Don't always, we are not asking you to develop the hypothesis where with the there is likewise. So then how you can develop emotional confident. rather than there is. So you can develop like this. Emotional confidence has a significant positive impact on the customer retention, right? So anyway, the sample should be mentioned. Now, if you are taking here, it is a banking industry, you need to write down that one as well, right? Emotional confidence has a significant positive impact on the customer retention in the banking industry, right? Banking industry. That means, anyway, when you are writing the hypothesis, there are 4 hypotheses. If you are starting it with if we are starting with these 4 hypotheses with the term there is, you have to write down all the hypotheses with the term there is. If you write down the H1 with the there is and again H2, emotional confidence and the brand loyalty has a positive impact likewise, you can't develop your hypothesis like this. All the hypotheses, this is the one point where the students are really confused with. So normally you need to develop the hypothesis according to the logical manner. And all the hypotheses should be have the similar pattern. එකක් එක විදිහකට ලියනවා නේද? ඉස්සෙල්ලා පටන් ගන්නවා there is කියලා null hypothesis එකක් there is වලින් ලියලා H2 එක ලියනවා emotional confidence has a positive impact on the brand loyalty කියලා. ආයෙ there is ගන්නවා H3 ගන්නවා. ආයෙ H4 ලියනකොට ලියනවා the emotional brand loyalty has a mediating impact in between the emotional confidence and the customer retention. කීක එක එක විදිහට hypothesis ලියන්න බෑ ඔයාලට. Right? So you need to develop the hypothesis based on the similar patterns. If you started with there is, you have to end up with there is for the H4 also. So therefore, you can, when you are developing the hypothesis, you can refer the previous findings also. Definitely, you need to derive the hypothesis based on the previous findings. Another new thing, right? So if you want to develop the hypothesis H1, right? So there is an impact of emotional evidence. There is significant impact of emotional confidence on the customer retention in banking industry, Sri Lanka. So this is a testable statement, right? This testable statement can't develop by your own. It should be backed by the literature review. It should be backed by the literature review. මේ දෙන්න අතර සම්බන්ධතාවයක් තියෙනවා කියලා කියන්න ඔයාට බෑ. ඔයාට ඒකට literature තියෙන්න ඕන. කලින් මෙන්න මේ relationship එක test කරලා තියෙන්න ඕන. එහෙම නැතුව ඔයාට hypothesis එක develop කරන්න බෑ. ඕන විදිහට variables ඔයාට research එකට ගන්න බෑ. ඕන විදිහට hypothesis develop කරන්න බෑ. ඇයි ඒ හේතුව? ඔයාට හොඳ literature source එකක් තියෙන්න ඕන. අඩුම තරමේ නේද? 4-5 දෙනෙක්වත් මේ රිලේෂන්ෂිප් එක ටෙස්ට් කරලා තියෙන්න ඕන. That is regarding H1. So then when you are developing the research hypothesis 2, it is regarding the emotional confidence and the brand loyalty. So then you should have the literature. You should have the previous findings which tested the emotional confidence towards the brand loyalty. Otherwise, you can't develop the hypothesis. So that is the importance of the literature review. So therefore, when you are developing the literature review, you need to identify the empirical findings according to the hypothesis. Or literature review හදනකොට මෙන්න මේවා අතර තියෙන relationship එක confirm කරන්න මේ දෙන්න අතර conduct research හොයාගන්න. H2 අතර H2 confirm කරන්න research හොයාගන්න. H3 confirm කරන්න research හොයාගන්න. අනිත් එක mediate එකට නම් issue එකක් නැහැ. මොකද mediate එකක් අපි අලුතින් කියනවා සමහර වෙලාවට there may be little information or little empirical evidences may be available regarding the mediator. Right. Anyway, regarding the direct relationship, you need to have the empirical evidences. So that is why we are developing the that is why we are doing the literature review. Right. Last one, right? So when we are testing the hypothesis, so what are the steps need to be followed, right? So first you need to identify the null hypothesis as well as the alternative hypothesis. You need to develop those things. So then you have to identify the appropriate statistical test depending on whether the data collected from the parametric and the non-parametric test will identify that one once we are coming to the research quantitative data analysis, and then definitely you need to identify the significant level, whether it is a 0.1, 0.05 and the 0.01, and then the results, you have to interpret the results, and then you have to identify whether the null hypothesis will be rejected or else whether null hypothesis or else the alternative hypothesis will be accepted. So that means you have to identify the critical value that is normally regarding the significant level. If it is less than 0. If the hypothesis value is less than 0.05, normally we are accepting it. If it is more than 0.05 or else your significant level, we are rejecting the hypothesis. That means the hypothesis p-value should be less than 0.05 or else it should be less than the significant level. 0.05 කියලා කියන්නේ significant level එක නේ. significant level එකට වඩා සමහරවිට 0.1 වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්, 0.001 වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්, එහෙම නැත්නම් 0.05 වලට වැඩි වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. So that is you need to the significant level should be adjusted in your statistical techniques. So then once you adjusted that one, so and once you get the results, you have to identify you have to test the results with the critical values. Critical value may be definitely the level of significance. Definitely we are discussing those things and once we coming to the data analysis techniques, right? Again, before winding up the session, I will give a hint to you. So this is additional information. Okay. Now already 50% has been covered, right? Regarding your subject, regarding your research methodology. Once we did the conceptualization, in the sense 50% is completed. So then you can develop this question. Before developing anyway, I will determine the 4th of January will be your deadline for the portfolio activity number 3. Right? So you need to develop the literature. You need to finalize the questions, objectives, and develop the literature for a identified one research topic. Right? So before moving to the development of research, literature review. You need to write down the 300 words. Anyway, first you identify your research problem. And then you prepare this table, right? You prepare this table, research problem, and then research questions, right? So then research objectives, and then hypothesis. Later on, we'll identify data analysis techniques. If you will be able to identify these 4 things, right? So normally you are having one research problem, right? Research problem is one, but you have the 3 to 4 research questions, right? Same research question will be converted to the research objective, same one, but you need to start with 2 plus action verb.
Excuse me,
Right?
miss.
So then, yes.
Miss, අපි දැන් ලිටරචර් කරනකොට මේ තියෙන ටෙම්ප්ලේට් එකේ විදිහටමද කරන්න ඕන?
මේක ලිටරචර් රිවිව් එක නෙමෙයි පුතා. මේ මම කියන්නේ ලිටරචර් රිවිව් එකට යන්න කලින්. හරිද? ලිටරචර් රිවිව් එකේ වචන 300 ලියන්න ඕනේ.
ඔව්.
තේරෙනවද? හැබැයි ලිටරචර් රිවිව් එක ලියනවා කියලා කියන්නේ ඔයා ටොපික් එක නිකන් ෆයිනලයිස් කරනවා වගේ වෙනවනේ. ඊට
ඔව්.
කලින් මෙන්න මේ ටික හදාගන්න. හරිද?
මිස් මම
හයි
කලිනුත් අර මිස් කලින් ටෙම්ප්ලේට් එකක් දාලා තිබ්බේ ඒක අනුව තමයි මිස් මේ ඒ විදිහට වගුවක් හදලා තමයි අර
ඒ
ඇක්ටිවිටි නම්බර්
ලිටරචර් රිවිව් එක. ඒ ලිටරචර් රිවිව් එක මම කියන්නේ මේ ඒක නෙමෙයි මම මේ කියන්නේ.
ඒක එහෙම
හරිද?
හැදුවට කමක් නැහැ නේ මිස් ඒක මම ඒ
ඒක
විදිහට
හදා.
හදලා තිබ්බේ
ඒක
ඒක
හදාගන්න.
ටෙම්ප්ලේට් එකට අනුව තමයි මිස් කරේ
හරි. ඒක හරි. ඒක ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ. ඒක ලිටරචර් රිවිව් කරන්නේ කොහොමද කියන එක. මම මේ
ඔව්
කතා කරන්නේ ලිටරචර් රිවිව් කියන එක නෙමෙයි. මම මේ කතා කරන්නේ ලිටරචර් රිවිව් එකකට යන්න කලින් ලියන්න කලින් ඔයාලා මෙන්න මේ කියන ටික ෆයිනලයිස් කරගන්න. ඔයාගේ ක්වෙස්චන්, ඔයාගේ ප්‍රොබ්ලම් එක මොකක්ද කියලා ලියා
ඔව්
ගන්න මේ ටේබල් එකේ. එතකොට ඒක
හරි
කඩන්න. ඔයාලා මේ කඩන්නේ ඔයාගේ ලිටරචර් රිවිව් එකෙන් අරගෙන. දැන් ඔයාලට මම කියලා දුන්න Excel sheet එකකින් ඔයාලා සමරි කරගත්ත ටිකක් තියෙනවනේ. ඒ ටිකෙන් ඔයා questions හදා.
හරි මිස්
හරිද?
හරි
question එකම convert කරනවා මොකටද? objective එකට නේ. if there is what is the impact? මෙන්න මේ මම එකක් කරලා පෙන්නන්න. I don't have a time. If you started like this, what is the relationship between service quality and the customer loyalty of the commercial banks in Sri Lanka? එහෙනම් මොකක්ද ඔයාගේ research objective එක? To identify the relationship. ඒකම තමයි convert කරන්න. To identify the relationship between service quality and the customer loyalty of the licensed commercial banks in Sri Lanka. So then, how you can develop the hypothesis? Yes, hypothesis. There is a relation or a significant relationship between service quality and the customer loyalty. Anyway, to identify the relationship, you need to identify the data analysis techniques. මේ format එක මේ එකම ඔයාලට පේනවා ඇති question එක objective format එකට convert කරනවා. ඒ objective එකේම තමයි අපි hypothesis හදන්නේ. මේ table එක create කරගන්න try කරන්න දැන් ඉඳන්. ඔයාලගේ ප්‍රොබ්ලම් එක මොකක්ද? ක්වෙස්චන් මොනවද? ඔබ්ජෙක්ටිව්ස් මොනවද? ඒ අනුව කොහොමද හයිපෝතසිස් හැදෙන්නේ කියන එක. ඔයාලා ලිටරචර් එක කරන්න කලින් මෙන්න මේ ටේබල් එක ෆිල් කරගන්න පුළුවන් නම් යන්නේ. ටේබල් එක ෆිල් කරගන්න පුළුවන් නම් හොඳයි. Anyway, I hope that is enough for today. So then we'll wind up the session. If you have any question regarding the lesson, you can contact me directly, no issue. Anyway, the deadline for the portfolio activity number 3, it is 4th of January 2024. Okay, thank you very much for your participation. Have a good evening. Anyway, wish you all the best for your new year. Thank you very much.